Hello, welcome to More Tools and Sense. This is the show where we take cars that nobody talks about and we turn them into cars that people call the cops about. Now today's build is something I'm very excited for, something I've wanted to do for a long time. This is going to be a car worthy of riding into Valhalla. I present to you the Studebreaker. Alright, well, to understand the motivation behind this build, first of all, watch the movie Fury Road. It is the absolute best of the Mad Max series, in my humble opinion. From the very first time I saw this film, I have wanted to build one of these beautiful, disastrous, destructive, monstrous vehicles, and I'm so excited to get started on it today. And I stumbled upon this 1950 Studebaker Champion. It's got the bullet nose and just the right amount of patina and then a little extra to be the perfect starting point for this project. It is going to need some repair of the floor pans, the rocker panels, they're both kind of destroyed, and then of course we're going to be pulling it off the frame and dropping it onto a much bigger truck frame, lifting up the back, putting some big tires, maybe some flamethrowers, huge exhaust out the back, giant V8 engine, who knows how far we're going to go, but I am so excited for this build, so let's get started. Alright, well the rust is mostly on the underside, so step one, we're going to fix these floors. I said doors, right? We're gonna fix these doors. Alright. Well, as far as 70-year-old frames go, this one's actually not too bad. But that doesn't really matter because we're throwing it all away anyway. But before I separate the frame from the body, I want to make sure that I fix the floor pans and just shore up the body enough to make sure it's not going to flex itself to death as soon as I separate the two. Well, it's been about 1 hour and project creep has already set in. I was only planning on patching this little spot on the floor just to keep some rigidity, but this body mount seems to be pretty bad. There's still some solid metal under there though, so what I'm going to do is cut the majority of out, grind down to the bare metal, and then add some extra braces in there to make sure it's nice and strong before we unbolt anything. Alright, well this might look like the worst rust on the car, and that's because it is. It's actually not structural. It doesn't seem to be affecting the rigidity of the body too much, so I think I'm going to try to separate the body from the frame before I tackle this issue. Also, I'm just excited to get it pulled apart and don't want to do it. So this old Studebaker has these super cool pedals that are installed underneath the floor. And in fact, the clutch actually still works. So I can reach down here and turn the drive shaft. When I let the clutch up, it stops. That's pretty nuts. Well, foiled again. I was ready to lift the body off of the frame, or at least start undoing all the bolts, but then I came upon this body mount, which is not really attached so much. Now there is a little bit of structure. It's still holding up the body close here to the frame, but there's no way to get a lift on that. So I'm going to have to find a way to weld something onto it so that I could actually lift the body off of the frame. Removing body bolts out of a 70-year-old fender panel? No problem. Why wouldn't they just come right out? Got it. Alright, last thing I need to do before I separate the frame from the body is put a couple of quick cross pieces. The trunk is held together right now by one tiny little piece of sheet metal, and I think it's going to get super floppy and flaccid back here, which nobody likes. So I'm going to weld in a couple of pieces of metal, and then that should hopefully keep it rigid while we separate the frame. Well, it's finally time to remove all the 70-year-old body bolts off of this car, and we're going to get them off there one way or another. probably not going to use any of this hardware again. I still like to keep everything that comes off the car, just in case. Alright, well the time is near. I've got the Studebaker body up here. I've got the Dodge frame down here. We're going to put them together. First thing in the way is what used to be the spare tire well, and we're going to get rid of that. Chop chop. Alright, well the body is positioned over top of the frame, but now I need to spend a lot of time with this guy and this guy to make sure that things are lined up properly, and then we can start making modifications, and then everything will fit together so nicely. Alright, well now that the body's all squared up and centered, I'm trying to adjust the height. Now the back of the car is going to be higher, it's going to have bigger tires, and the front is going to sit down a little bit lower, so I'm going to try to get it a little closer to the frame. Right now the steering box is kind of in the way, so we're going to cut and bend some of this metal out of the way, and then we'll get it just a couple inches lower down before we start building the body mounts. Alright, well I'm actually going to start with these two front body mounts because, well, they're the easiest ones to get to. They're already lined up with the frame, and I'm just going to take some of this 1.5" box tubing, and I need to shim the front up because it's not perfectly square, and then just weld another piece on the end, make it the right size, and I'm going to leave this 1/2" gap because that is how thick the polyurethane bushing pads I ordered are. Well, the first two body mounts are done, but before I start tackling the others, I want to get an engine in there so we can see about fitment. Now, in order to do that, I'm going to need an engine. Here's one. Now, this is a Dodge 318. It came with the frame, and if you want to learn more about this engine, then watch episode 2 of the Studebreaker, where I go into much more detail on how I took this rusted lump of garbage and turned it into what is hopefully going to be a pretty decent engine. But there's only one way to find out, and that's to hit subscribe so that you won't miss part 2 of the Studebreaker here on More Tools and Sense.